Welcome back to the Latitude Podcast. If you are new, hello, hi, pick up a chair, sit down. If you are a returning listener, thank you so much for creating and giving us the ability to continue to have this platform. I am your senior platform manager. I am Jeremy Jones. Great to meet you. Thank you. Hey, hi, hello. Today, we have Andrew Goldner, CEO, co-founder of GrowthX. I will never be able to speak through Andrew's background. I think as great as Andrew is able to speak, you will learn that throughout the course of this pod. But I will allow Andrew to let the people know, hey, what are you doing? And why should they have called you yesterday?
Why should they have called me yesterday? Well, listen, if they need help with sales and they're looking to maybe raise capital, that's why they should be in touch. I mean, GrowthX is dedicated to helping B2B founders in rising cities with the toughest sales challenges, because that's how we do due diligence. As you and I were talking about off camera before, it's so much more valuable than cocktail parties, data rooms, and demo days. Actually rolling up your sleeves and helping someone, and in the process, building a healthy, sustainable, long-term relationship with them, where your worst case scenario is that you've helped them, is the reason we do what we do, which is why first we help, then we invest, and together we rise.
Love it. I love the approach. And I also maybe taking it back a little bit. I think it's important to really highlight the fact that you guys are being impactful specifically for the Western New York ecosystem. We talk a lot about the coast, I think, on this show and in general, but it's amazing to have folks like you in the community who have worked at places like DoubleClick, like ran operations over at Thomson Reuters, been international, and also been at Salesforce early days around the genesis of the internet, and are staying in the community. So first off, thank you. Thank you for doing all the great things that you do in the community. But that being said, and I tried to put that as artfully as I possibly could, I want to talk about maybe how that relates to sales, and really what's the proportion between the art versus science of sales. I think that there is that empathetic part about sales that really informs the art portion of it, right? Knowing when to lean in and maybe when to take a step back, and also knowing when you should be in the room and when you shouldn't. But then there's that science portion of sales, right? Where you have your CRM, you're in clay, you're running experiments. How do you think about that distribution, and how does it fall for you?
I think it's a great question. And I mean, obviously, we think it leans more heavily towards science than it does art. It is hypothesis driven. There is a framework and a system and a structure that's very similar to the system and structure that we've built over the last 25 years to make building products better and more efficient and easier. And you can do the same thing for building markets. It's just most of us haven't done that. And the fact that there is no profession of sales. I started out my career, as you know, as a corporate lawyer. And in fact, it was, my bar is in the state of New York. It's where I practiced. And, I had to go to a 3-year accredited institution. I went to Georgetown Law. And so it was a accredited law school. So I had to go 3 years there. And then in New York, I had to sit for a 2.5-day mind-bending examination before the powers that be in New York would bless me and say I'm a lawyer so that I could help you write your contract. And it's the same thing with doctors, engineers, accountants, and others, but there literally is no profession of sales, which is why if you know how to build products and you start a company, you're a founder. But if you know how to sell products and you start a company, you're a non-technical founder, and it's a second-class status of citizen. And so I think despite what we think from Glengarry Glen Ross or from the experience we have in retail, that sales is about being an extrovert, or even worse, being pushy, being aggressive. The reality is, if you are a founder, you are a salesperson. There is an art to it. There is a judgment and an intuition and an acumen. But, we can get into the nurture versus nature conversation there. I mean, is this something that your DNA born with?
Yeah.
Or because of the experiences that I've been blessed to have, because of the lotteries that I won before I was a sentient human being with 2 parents and a certain zip code looking the way I did, being born in America.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a whole nother kind of conversation that we can and should be having. But the reality is, of course, there is some art to it. Certain founders, we were talking about them just a moment ago, have wonderful instincts, but then benefit from understanding the science and the structure and the framework, because though your product and your market may very well be unique, the path to finding product market fit is not. It's a formula. So why aren't we teaching it?
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of that resonates. I've talked about my background a little bit on the show, but I'm a kid from Detroit at the end of the day, right? And it's been up and down, and a lot of what I have learned has really been on the back of an understanding that I was not equipped with everything, and I have to go out there and get all the things so I can get to where I want to be, and get to that level of proficiency. So it does pique my interest when you talk about the fact that it leans a little bit more heavily towards the science-based part of it. If you are a founder, and I think the VCs do put a premium on founder-led sales, and it's something that I think about maybe a lot more now, and also especially as processes like PLG become way more common, and there are more tools out there for that sales enablement strategy of really surrounding your reps with all the right tools, lead book, everything like that to go out and close deals. So right now, I guess, what would you say would be the back pocket skill set that maybe a introverted founder should have if they're considering about driving their own sales momentum?
Yeah, great question again, Jeremy. And listen, I want to say though that the sales enablement, the tools, the things you're referring to are top of the funnel tools for founders who already have product market fit and actually have something scalable. Which, to maybe a conversation we have, is when you bring in a salesperson, because salespeople pursue revenue for the purpose of profit. But market developers, which is what a founder-led salesperson is, pursue revenue for the purpose of learning. And so first of all, it's not about skills, it's about traits. Insatiable curiosity for learning, right? A appetite for risk, a comfort level in uncertainty, running thoughtful experiments. The lesson is more the scientist in the laboratory than it is the salesperson, in the seat. You don't just put stuff in a petri dish and wonder what's happening. The scientist has a hypothesis before they walk into a laboratory. How many founders, before they do anything, actually wrote down the experiment they were running, the hypothesis they were testing, and kept track of what they were learning during that process? That's one thing that's really important. I think what's also important is that a scientist, once they're inside of the laboratory, isn't looking to prove themselves right. They're seeking the truth.
Yeah.
And a scientist doesn't bring ego into the laboratory. And so these are characteristics more they are traits, or more they are skill sets. And I think these are the things that we want to look for in a market developer, which is very different than a salesperson. But remember, the tools that you're talking about are tools that are useful when you are ready to scale, when you have a very specific customer type and use case that you've sold to before successfully, following a certain pattern of behavior and values, both pre-sale and customer success after the sale, such that what you're doing is not only on purpose, but you're getting better at it over time, and you're using the patterns in your favor. That's all top of the funnel. But prior to product market fit, you should be focused entirely on the bottom of the funnel. And everything is high touch, white glove, non-scalable, consultative. I put a blog post out a while ago. It's on the website. It's something that I talk about frequently with founders, especially those that are selling software, even if it's AI nowadays. And that is, before you have product market fit, SaaS doesn't stand for software as a service. It stands for service as a software. Because everything initially is consultative, because it's not your product. It's just the help you can provide.
Do things that don't scale.
Do things that don't scale. And so I think those tools that are out there, and there's a lot of them, especially with AI now, can be extremely efficient for founders that have dialed in their signal and have product market fit. But you don't want tools. You don't want to scale noise. And what we have found is, if you haven't wrung the inefficiencies out of your system before you scale it, then noise scales non-linearly.
Where do you start? If you're a founder, and maybe you are a founder who has, you've been running experiments, and maybe there is a little bit of confirmation bias in there. Maybe you are stacking the deck a little bit. Your thumb's on the scale. If you were to give advice for someone to do a self audit, to be able to take a step back and then maybe take a look at what they're doing and maybe understand what is noise, what's not noise, how would you maybe parse through It's as much as you can tell us in the next, hour.
Well, first of all, and not to parse through your words, but as a recovering lawyer, sometimes I can't help myself.
Please do.
You got to check yourself, because it's not what you do. It's what you do for your customers. That's what matters. So that's the first check. How much of your time is features and function? How much of your time is spent talking about yourself? Jeremy, if you and I were good friends, as we're starting to become, and you called me up and said, Andrew, I heard you're going to be in Buffalo. Do you have time to sit down? I have something I need your help with. Yeah, of course, Jeremy. Let's do that. And when we sat down together, all I did is talk about myself. You'd think I'm a weirdo, maybe even a little bit psychotic. Like, if you and I were good friends and I sat down with you because I had a problem I needed your help with, what would be the first thing you would say to me when we sat down together?
I think the first thing I'd say is thank you. Thanks for coming. That. I appreciate that you're here.
Expressing gratitude. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And then what would you say?
Well, and then I'd give you a context about what the problem is that I feel like it is, I'd
or
say,
if it was,
here's what I've done
if I had the problem and you were there to help me, but you didn't know, all you knew is I just had a problem and you were there to try to help me, what would you say to me, or what would you ask me?
Yeah. I don't know if I would, and this, I know this is might sound like a non-answer, but I think I'd ask you what's keeping you up at night, and then just let you talk to me.
Amen. And that's exactly why.
Yeah.
And the reason you would do that, first of all, expressing gratitude, practicing gratefulness is really important to stay centered, understand what's the priority. We could have a whole podcast about that. Yeah. But the other reason you're doing is because you're a normal functioning human being. You're not a clinical DSM-4 psychotic. And the first thing that you do when you talk to someone who you care about and who needs help that you think you can provide is you ask them what's going on. You try to figure it out. And though you might not think this way, the subconscious reason you're doing that is because you care about the person and you care about your time, and you're trying to determine, do they have a problem that I can help with?
Yeah.
Because if not, I've got to stop this right now and help them get the help they need. So why is it that when we sit down with a customer who presumably is someone you care about and who needs your help, because if this person doesn't need your help, or they don't know if they need help, then why are you giving them your time?
Yeah.
And by the way, if it's not someone you care about, then why are you putting your life behind a company where the people you serve and the problems you help them solve isn't your passion? So I'm just going to presume that this is someone you care about, and you care about the problem, and you think and hope that they have that problem. Then why are you sitting down and spouting off about yourself and your features and your functions, when what you should be doing is saying, tell me, what's going on in your world? What's keeping you up at night? Not what do you do that can reverse engineer to what I do so I can sell you a product or service? But genuinely let me understand, are you someone who shares my worldview and has a problem that I'm focused on solving, that you care about solving right now, so I know you deserve my time and I deserve yours?
Yeah.
And I think it's really important that that's kind of the process that we go through. So again, to check yourself, and what advice and where would I start is, how am I spending my time? Is it about what I do or what I do for them? Am I forcing features and functions? Do I genuinely care about their problems? And am I very aware of their problems? Am I confident and comfortable enough that I've done the work to understand, either through the experiences that I've had that led me to want to solve this problem, or the experiences that I'm aware of that led me to want to solve this specific problem, that I know who the people are that I know I am most capable of helping right now.
Yeah.
And that includes people who actually have the problem and know they have the problem and prioritize solving that problem. And yes, in business, have economic power that solve that problem and are willing to use some of that economic power to solve that problem right now. And so this is where I would want to start the conversation. I would want to start poking myself, or hopefully working with a co-founder or a family or a friend, have that dialogue to check myself, to make sure that I've kind of done all that work, so that when I sit down with someone, and it's in the context of business and not just a good friend I'm trying to help, that I can quickly get to know.
Yeah. And I love what I love about that framework. And just I think framework is maybe a little bit too reductive. It's really like that set of qualities that you're looking for, right? It kind of comes back to empathy for me. And there's that saying, right? You can't teach empathy.
Yeah.
But when you're hiring, you're trying to, I think when you're hiring people who are doing sales, a key thing is you want to hire people with a high level of quote unquote EQ, or, ability to really be empathetic and actually understand what the customers are going through. So you're willing to have those conversations so you can really know them. As a person who has been in senior manager positions, you've led teams, you've built teams, you've hired, what do you look for to how do you hire the best salespeople who also come with that empathetic quotient? And is it even something you can screen out when you hire them, or is it something you have to just monitor and fire accordingly?
Well, I mean, I think, listen, again, for us, again, because at the stage at which that we operate now at GrowthX, the stage that is relevant and most interesting to us, we call it pre-product market fit. Venture can call it Series A, but that's a non sequitur.
Yeah.
We call it pre-product market fit. Just because you have $1 million or 2 or 3 of revenue doesn't mean you have product market fit. So we try to stay away from the venture colloquial terms that we've all become familiar with in entrepreneurism, and just call it for what it is. Even more plain English. Do you have that, repeatable playbook that you're running and it seems to be getting better and running well? It's more about the qualities.
Yeah.
And here's a maxim that's one of the most important to me that anybody who knows me is going to hear. And as we get to know each other more, you're going to hear more often. And that is that everything communicates.
Yeah.
Everything communicates. And listen, you can say anything you want, but you can't not communicate. And so what are the qualities that I'm looking for? It's not just in a direct answer to the question, because someone can say a variety of things, but it's in the situations. How have you behaved? How have you chose not to behave? How have you processed it? Like, if something is a priority, if you think a certain way and have a worldview, that is going to come through all of the time, because everything communicates. And if I train my ear and I'm oriented towards long-term, sustainable, healthy, non-violent relationships, right? Physical is only one form of violence. Non-physical violence is just as dangerous. Those are unhealthy, short-term relationships. If I am orienting towards the long-term, then whether it's an interview or a relationship or a business partner, everything we do, I view as a series of invitations. And I am sending you an invitation to be the person I hope and want you to be a continued part of my life. And through your responses, your RSVPs, because everything communicates, you're either going to nurture yourself towards me or away from me. And the only thing I ask is, if you're going to nurture yourself away from me, you go quickly and you go in peace. Because at some point, even though we're not in a good congruent place now, maybe later we'll be in a congruent place.
Yeah.
This is as equally true for personal relationships as it is professional relationships. So in interviewing for sales or a market developer, or you're in the job and you're working together trying to go to market or do the things, I just believe, or you're trying to determine if you are going to be a good fit for a company that we are helping. I think it's more about, giving you the opportunity to communicate to me in more ways than just the answer you're providing, to determine whether you share that worldview because of how you handled that situation, or how you're spending your time now, or who you're spending your time with. And I think that is the worldview that we espouse. That's the way that we go about it. So of course, it's no surprise that we, force founders to work with us for 16 weeks in the weeds together before we consider whether it's a good investment opportunity or not.
Yeah.
And our investors are less surprised nowadays about the market insights we generate, because that's pretty obvious. We're going to generate them positive and negative. But where the real power is and what they're really waking up to is where the 16-week surfaces is what we know about the people.
Yeah. It sounds really like, maybe I don't think there's a magic bullet to things, but it sounds like a big part of making the right hiring decision, making the right decision about who you want to be around in a business context. At least in the view that I'm understanding now, is really, it's about developing a soundscape so you can hear.
Amen.
Listening to what these people are saying, listening to how they're interacting with each other, with you, like not just about what the verbal is, but the nonverbal, just try to take that to kind of develop a lattice.
If you're not working your priorities, you're working someone else's.
Yeah, exactly.
It's being intentional. And again, this is, I work very hard to be an effective father who does this for my two daughters, as equally as and fervently as I do it for the founders who I'm blessed to be able to be a part of their lives. If we don't first determine what kind of company we want to build and how we want to build it and who we want to build it with, then how are we going to reverse engineer or manifest that future that we're so interested in? Let's not get lucky. Let's not be wrong.
Yeah.
And to do that, you have to be intentional. You first have to take the time to determine what are the adjectives that attract you and what are the adjectives that repel you, and then find fit in this world. Same thing when you're going to market for a B2B company who shares your worldview. Yeah. That's going to be an easier, more efficient sale. Why are you starting with something that's harder?
I believe that I appreciate it. And I think that's right. And I think that something I want to kind of dig into maybe a little bit more. So I believe that most people function on a level of sort of learned experience, right? Like, you have your principles of how you interact in business based on the good and maybe the bad stuff, maybe more times the bad stuff, of what's happened. So you action on that reflection. It feels like the views that you have around, building up a sort of a understanding about the people around you in order to make those decisions about who should be, in the company later on, right? What were the hard fought lessons that maybe you learned while you were building internationally with Thomson Reuters? That, how did you connect with in an overseas market? How did you make those connections? How did you get that understanding to be able to build an agile team and ultimately stand up new business in a geography where you're effectively trying to understand people and a culture via maybe a series of interviews versus being able to just watch you out in the wild?
Yeah. Wonderful question. I think part of it is just, some of the wisdom that I'm trying to gain from, the amount of days that I walk the earth, the amount of revolutions I have of the sun, but also, being blessed with people who've cared enough about me to look back to me and share opportunities for me to know now what they wish they knew when they were my age. And I've always been blessed to have people like that in my life. And I've always taken it seriously. And part of it is the wisdom. I think what you're referring to is what I refer to as experience. Because experience is what you get when you don't get what you want. And I'm a very experienced person. And the other wisdom is, what is my goal each day, but to be less wrong tomorrow, which includes practicing self-love and not beating myself up over the time. Because if I'm beating myself up over the past, I'm not learning into the future, right? I mean, listen, it sounds a little obvious. It is, but what I most was fortunate to pick up while living overseas, primarily in Hong Kong, but also in Singapore. And during that time with a remit, that was global, but primarily focused on Asia Pacific and the Middle East, drastically different people, drastically different cultures. I came to talk to the Home Office a little bit that it's not the United States of Asia. And you can't treat it as such.
Yeah.
I think, and listen, cliches are there for a reason. So I'm going to be a little bit of a cliche, but especially for Americans, and especially now, we've got to get out of our comfort zone. We've got to live elsewhere. We've got to gain a perspective. I mean, we are blessed to live in the United States of America and to be able to afford the opportunities that we have. But unfortunately, it leads us to also believe that, there aren't different ways to do things. And especially with the way that a lot of us, certainly privileged Americans were raised without even, having a fully formed prefrontal cortex, was not, this is one way to do it, but this is the way. This is the only way.
Yeah.
And so naturally, I had never been to Hong Kong in my life until I moved there. I, behaved like the ugly American. And it was violent, it was unhealthy. It was not, it was not sustainable. And so, one of the biggest challenges that I had is, a team that included drastically different types of cultures.
Yeah.
And really just trying to, I talk a lot, you heard me earlier refer frequently to brute force attack. So many founders take it when they go to market. I try to brute force attack, manage multiple diverse types of international team people or business partners from different places. And rather than approaching it from the mindset of abundance, where everything is an opportunity, I approached it from the mindset of scarcity, where everything was a challenge.
Yeah.
And as an American, and maybe as a white male, my response was to put my head down and go at it. And that didn't help.
If I may, and thank you so much for sharing about this too, because I think it takes from a vulnerable place. And I've had similar experience, and I don't know if it's just because I don't think it's because you're a white male, to be honest with you. As a person who had a very multicultural schooling, and then my parents referred to that time though in my educational career as the bubble, and that things change when you go out of your specific comfort zone, and you're going to have to be open and ready for all those things. But I didn't learn the open and ready for all those things part until I had thoroughly put my head into the sand and went right at it.
Yeah.
For about maybe 2 or 3 years outside of it.
Yeah.
So
and I don't think white males have a corner on the market on that, but I do think that, there is a privilege, and with that privilege can predominantly result in that kind of approach. But some of it is just, type A personality, and like, we can get it. We could
attracts.
Yeah, we could self-analyze for another hour, but people are definitely not interested in that.
Yeah, all right.
But I definitely learned through mistakes. And so again, adopting the attitude of just trying to be less wrong, and always being someone who is willing to admit that they were wrong, and always wanting to do better, and having people that were kind and generous in their feedback. And to your point earlier, the only 2 words out of your mouth when someone gives you feedback are thank and you, because it's a gift. It doesn't mean you have to agree and do what they say, but it's a gift, and it should be treated that way. And for whatever reason, I've always been open and interested and willing to admit and hear the feedback and try to improve. So it's those hopefully rapid, explosive feedback loops that lead to experience. But, that experience of just needing to do that well, and learning to do that well through just needing to do that well, I definitely carried back home with me, and use just in a variety of circumstances now. And again, it's an enduring gift. I try to think of the enduring gifts that I've been given throughout my life. Some of them, earned in ways that were harder and dirtier than they should have been. But I'm also a glass half full, optimist. And so, I always look to the enduring lessons that I can learn from situations, so that the mistakes I make next are new ones, not the same ones.
I hear you. And I think that maybe to that point, I feel as though maybe the landscape is changing a little bit about how we run for experiments, and also eventually get the results, right? Those experiences that are eventually going to help us push the needle, make the better product, make the better sales motion, whatever. All of those things are becoming, I think, more readily available to us now. And hopefully we're in a place where we can run those faster. And I think a big part of that right now is at that early stage, I think, where you could get a lot of the experience. And when you're in that first SDR function, when you're in that first BDR function, and you are, running, you're trying to hit your quota and you're trying to make it, right? I think a lot of that's being extracted now to the AI layer, and this is a partially VC, partially founder, partially community focused podcast. So I think we should probably talk about AI just a little bit. So sorry about the eye rolls, but what do you think about the agentic layer in SDR functions now, and for lead gen, and also maybe even for customer success, which, by the way, I think is an incredibly important function for stickiness overall.
100%
kind of weird to have AI doing it.
Yeah, 100% I agree. So, the thing about agentic, the thing about AI, and by the way, we could have a full podcast about the dangers of giving AI agency. It's one of the 5 things we weren't supposed to do. Yeah. We weren't supposed to expose them to Kahneman, Tversky. We weren't supposed to, give them agency. We weren't supposed to, there's a lot of things that we weren't supposed to do. Teach them to code. This is going to be a challenge for humans, but that's a different conversation. The thing about it is, if you lack experience, you can't get the benefit of AI, because what do you put in the prompt? If you yourself don't have the intellectual capacity and the experience to know the thing, then how do you know what you're asking the thing to help you with? You have to have the experience. The prompt is everything. What are you loading up that Copilot AI and asking it to do for you, or in certain cases in your place? I think a couple of things. Listen, I net very positive about AI, but I am among the group of people that know empirically there's a non-zero chance of real existential disaster to the human race as a biological form of substrate of intelligence relative to a non-biological substrate of intelligence, that it's soon going to be more intelligent than we are. So I think there's a lot of questions and things that we should have been asking for a long time, and a lot of frameworks and things that we should have been working on long before now, and that's going to be a challenge. I net out positive, though. I think AI can be extraordinarily helpful, very much like SaaS could. But let's just be clear, SaaS is workflow automation. If you do not have a workflow, what are you automating? You can't automate from start. Just like a very, very famous, well-known founder who's currently heavily involved in politics likes to say, you shouldn't be optimizing things that are not necessary. And so you can't create a automation around something that you don't already have the workflow to. It's the same thing with SaaS. So a lot of the ways that founders are using or trying to use AI right now, specifically with respect to my part of the world, B2B SaaS, B2B AI, any kind of B2B sales, if you don't have the experience, you're not going. If you haven't done enough of the legwork, then you don't know enough to know what to actually create the prompt around to get the help that you actually need. And so it's a lazy layer that's going to scale inefficiencies and kill you faster. Yeah. I also think that a lot of AI is scale. How do you do something better, faster, quicker, more efficiently if you don't exactly know what it is you're trying to do better, faster, more efficiently? Again, it's that whole idea of like, you can't spend time at the top of your funnel without having solved the bottom of your funnel, lest you put more noise in your funnel than signal in your funnel. And so inefficiencies scale nonlinearly. Yeah. And so I also think that we have to be careful with that AI, because it has a time and place, but it's not used in the right time and place. Just like an SDR, just a good old fashioned, biological human SDR. You before you have product market fit, is going to do more harm than good. Yeah. And so again, like there's absolute obvious value to it, but often is the case when there is a new a new efficiency opportunity through technology, it gets broadly applied more thoughtlessly than it should be. It's easy to kind of glance over it, during polite conversation at a cocktail party. But for founders in rising cities like Buffalo, it has a real impact on their ability to create economic wealth for their family, to create jobs for the community, to spread prosperity.
Totally. And I think that there is a real discussion about what AI means for the future of headcount, and also as it relates to the future of hiring, and how that relates to also maybe the middle class. Not to get too political, but it does feel like I do think that in those earlier jobs, we are seeing headcount reduction from like 2022 to now. If we're looking at like Series A size companies, I think it's something to the tune of like a 20% write down in overall headcount. I think we were at like 15. We were at like 16.3, and now we're at like 15.6. Don't quote me, but I think we're we're approaching a junction, I feel like, where instead of like what you're saying, right? When it comes down to like, does the SDR know how to prompt, right? Or they're like, okay, well, SDR may not know how to prompt. So why don't we hire like one salesperson who understands it really well, give them a boatload of responsibility and pay them likely pretty well, and then give them a senior title versus that early on ramp that can get you in the senior versus hiring that SDR, cultivating them and bringing them all the way into that place. But I guess that being said, and thinking about maybe, future of headcount and future of SDR, all that other stuff, what matters most is before all of this, and as you've alluded to many times, you have your ICP right, and you have PMF right. So can you take us through what you quantify as an ICP, and then how you would use that ICP to understand, to get to PMF?
Yeah. I mean, in plain English for us, ICP is Mr. Right Now.
Yeah.
And most founders don't fail because they spent too much time with Mr. Wrong. They fail because they spent too much time with Mr. Right. And that's because Mr. Right has a nickname, and it's Mr. Right Later. You need to spend 100% of your time with Mr. Right Now. And so what do we mean by Mr. Right Now? Well, there's a framework that you can fill in for your specific product, for your specific market. But the framework is all around, in a business setting, of all the potential people who have jobs with responsibilities and priorities where you can actually help them, and has to be help that comes down to something you can buy groceries with. Whether you're helping them improve their revenue, helping them save time, which translates into more money, or helping them save money, it comes down to something you can buy with a grocery, you can buy groceries with. Yeah. That specific measurable business difference, they're not all created equally. Not all revenue is created equally. You're going to tell me that your TAM, your SAM, your SOM, everybody, even in your SOM, every single person who could benefit from what it is you are selling them benefits equally, has the same problems, prioritizes them the same, the downside to not solving them are the same, are actively trying to solve them equally? There's no founder in the world that would answer those questions yes, but that's their behavior. Back to everything communicates. Well, that's interesting. You said, of course not, Andrew, without even thinking. But when I look at your actually behaviors, you're communicating as if they are all fungible.
Yeah.
So what is Mr. Right Now? Of all the potential people in the world who could benefit from what you're doing, relatively speaking, who has the problem the worst? Who has the worst downside? Who ranks at the highest priority? Who's most actively trying to solve it now? Who's putting money as part of their economic budget behind solving it now? Who, among all the problems they have, this is the score one. Do they have 10 problems that they're responsible for solving in their business role inside of their company, and their budget is meant to use to be solving those problems? Or do they only have one problem and it happens to be the problem that you solve? Right? The downside. I mean, we all know in business, it's just, whack-a-mole. It's not as if like the things I spend my time on are the only things that matter and it's black and white. I got to make judgment calls. There's a variety of things. It goes back to Maslow and its hierarchy of needs. I'm focused on clothing, food, and shelter, brother, and you're sitting here talking to me about a third home. Okay, well, certain customers are clothing, food, and shelter type of problem. Some customers sounds like a third home.
Yeah.
Who would you rather spend your time with now? And it's about stack ranking. We're going to, over the course of our time as a founder, building a business of enduring value, sell to all Mr. Right Nows and all Mr. Rights, or Miss Rights and Miss Right Nows. I'm asking you in what order you are going to do it. Because one of the things that I know for certain for the founders, you already don't have enough time and money to do what you need to do. And now you're inviting inefficiencies into your system. If every one of your SOM lined up right now and said, please let me become your customer, you couldn't take a fraction of them. How would you decide who to take? Including, by the way, what you talked about, customer success. It's not just about the sales process. Between a company and a person who is ready, willing, and able to take what you have sold them and do what they need to get the value that your product helps them get, And a person who has their hair on fire and can't even figure out how to organize the data that your product needs in order to get the value that you sold them, who would you rather sell to? Obviously. So why is it that you're selling to all of them? It's not just the sales process. These closed experiments don't end when the person says yes or no. If you have a customer type where it is a higher customer success lift versus a lower customer success lift, who would you stack rank higher? All I'm saying is, from an ICP, is stack rank constantly to constantly be wringing inefficiencies out of your sales process such that you are always going for who your current bullseye is and move out in concentric circles from there. That's your ideal customer profile. It is a hyper-specific customer type and use case. And the analogy that I use is the periodic table of elements because it drives it home. Most people stop at persona. Personas are great for idea stage founders, as are business model canvases. You don't go to market with those. You don't find product market fit with those. If your SOM was the periodic table of elements, your persona is one of those elements. Your ICP is one subatomic particle of one of those elements on the periodic table. And if you understand anything about quantum and superposition, you know that that subatomic particle can occupy two spaces simultaneously in space.
Yeah.
And so it's extraordinarily hard to do it. But just like a subatomic particle takes on a specific quantum space based on your observation of it, so too does that with a customer as you interact with them and help them understand the value proposition that most benefits them through a healthy conversation like the one we had when you thought I was a friend just needing help and you started asking what's going on, what keeps you up most at night. You didn't just start telling that person what keeps them up most at night and then brought out your laptop so you could demo.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that there's a good, there's almost like it's almost like a test. I think that you can run when you're having conversation with folks. It's just like, are you talking too much? Because I feel like you can reach a point where everything is an I statement and you're talking way too much and you're not actually listening to the other person and you completely wall them out. And that's, I think that's something that's a divide that's a little bit hard to manage. But what I want to maybe switch gears to and talk about a little bit more, and I think that this is this is a unique thing. You were at DoubleClick at the time that it was acquired by Google.
Leading up to that, correct? Yes.
Yeah. And I think that the landscape has changed right now. So I guess as you're screening companies, what excites you right now about the future of search, for one, and what also excites you right now about the way that we interact with maybe data coming in the future? AI has a lot of scaries to it, and there might be some net positives that come out of it. But there's also, I think, a whole host of maybe downstream advantages that have come from everyone rethinking, should I always use Google? So how is that thinking? How are you thinking about the future and what's exciting you?
I mean, I don't think anybody counts Google out, and they shouldn't, but I'm more of a Perplexity user now than a Google user.
True. Same.
I'd rather have the answer.
Yeah.
And I want the sources. I want to go down those rabbit holes. You know, as Lex Friedman likes to say, I want to linger. I'm a huge Lex Friedman fan, so I'm just going to put that out there.
Yeah, put it in too.
I think he's one of the best journalists alive. Yeah. And this is coming from someone who was blessed to work with 3,000 of what I consider the best journalists alive, and those are at Reuters. To me, that's where it gets really interesting. And then, agentic, like I have done the heavy lifting. I have enough cycles. So when I use AI, I can use it highly effectively, but I'm still manually, having the conversations, taking the transcripts, putting it into a GPT, running it through my prompt, getting the response, putting it into the email or putting it into the CRM or putting it into my analysis document. And the agentic, again, is going to just do the workflow for me. But again, I've done the work. I have the experience. I know what the prompt is. But again, I think it's just doing more of the work for me. And so to me, it's that future of search, and it's the notion that everything communicates. It's one of my favorite questions to ask both a prospect or a founder or whoever, which is like, okay, how did you find me? And I don't care if it's, I asked Jeremy and Jeremy said you should talk to Andrew, or I typed something into Google, or I went to ChatGPT. My next question is, what did you ask for? What did you say to Jeremy that he responded GrowthX? What did you say to GrowthX to Google that responded GrowthX? At least, in the responses, the answered responses from Google that were, on the first page above the fold. Because if you want to hide a dead body, you put it on the second page of the Google results because nobody looks there. If you went to ChatGPT, tell me what the prompt was that led you to me, because everything communicates. Yeah. You don't care about GrowthX. You have a problem. You prioritize that problem by spending time and using your resources to find help for that problem. That's what are the actual, like, if you can please remember what you literally said to Jeremy, that's what I want to know. And so when we look at the future of search and the power of AI with the transformer models and the amount of compute we now have, and now thanks to quantum, like, I want you to do it for me. I don't want search results. I actually don't even want the answer. I want the benefit that I get from having the answer. And it's very similar to the work that we do with founders when they're doing B2B sales. Yep. Founders stop with problem and they sell problem. But people don't buy problems. They buy payoffs to their problems that have a specific measurable business impact on them. Yeah. And so it's all about getting to what Dr. Neil Rackham in the SPIN framework refers to needs payoff. The N in the acronym SPIN is need payoff. And so I got to get to the need payoff. And the future to me, and Perplexity is as close as I've seen and will continue, I believe, to get there, is the need payoff. Because me going to Perplexity and getting the answer ain't the need payoff. I didn't go to Home Depot last weekend because I wanted nails. I went there because I wanted my wife to be happy and she wanted me to hang a picture and I couldn't do without nails. And founders, when they hear that, they start telling me about how many nails they have and how good the nails are and how different they are and how different materials they work in and how cheaper they are and the different sizes of the nails. And I'm like, I don't want nails. I want my wife to be happy. I just need the nails to get there. Why are you selling me nails?
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. Like, it's like if you want a bigger paycheck, it's like, well, I want a bigger house. I want a bigger car. And it's like, I want my kids to go to a good school, but you're really doing all of that for the purpose of making sure that your family is happy. You're getting down to that greater need. And maybe to segue, and I'm going to do so as artfully as I possibly can, which now is very clunky because I've announced it. We're nearing the end, and not really the end because we will live forever, immortalized in Spotify.
This has been wonderful.
Exactly,
Jeremy, you're terrific. I could talk all day with you.
Well, I appreciate it, Andrew, and I love having you on the pod. Maybe we can do it when the mics aren't in our faces too much.
I love it.
But as we try to do a smooth landing here, Andrew, thank you so much for talking to our audience. And without further ado, I'm going to leave it to you. Tell us what you're working on. Tell us where the people can find you so we can make sure that we're meeting those needs instead of just giving them more nails.
I appreciate that. Was like a Sean Evans handoff from Hot Ones. I feel like I should be like fanning my mouth from eating the bomb. Tell the world what you got going on. Camera 1, camera 2, camera 3. Yeah. And by the way, he's also I think he's one of the finest journalists in the world right now. Founders could learn a lot because the way he prepares for the interview is the way they should prepare for the sales conversation. You'll notice with Sean Evans, and go through back and look at every episode of Hot Ones, not a single episode goes by that somebody who is a guest whose entire life is spent with people asking them questions, not one guest ends that show and at some point during the show didn't say in some version to Sean, that's a great question. Yeah. That's testament to Sean Evans. What I have primarily going on in my life right now that's most relevant to the folks that live in Western New York is the Revenue Accelerator Galsano Institute. We call our 16-week sales coaching program the Revenue Accelerator, but it's anything but an accelerator. It's 16 weeks of sales coaching with a one-on-one coach. We're very blessed in Western New York to be partnered with Tom Galsano and the Galsano Institute for Business and Entrepreneurship. And this is a program that we have been running for many, many years across hundreds of founders. And Tom found out about it and decided that through his generosity, he wanted a version of it to be available only to Western New York founders. It's the same 16-week sales coaching that has been producing incredible results for founders for a decade. But it's exclusive only to Western New York founders, and Tom is sponsoring it. And he's sponsoring it for 3 reasons. One, he wants the only form of legal insider trading in America. And you better bet when I'm helping founders with sales, he's benefiting from the insights and finding good opportunities to invest through his family office, Grand Oaks. Wonderful people. 2, he started the Business and Entrepreneurship Institute, the Galsano Institute for Business and Entrepreneurship, because he wants to equip people with practical and tactical skills to actually participate and get a job where they can add value day one or start their own company without having to spend 4 years or take out loans to do it. It's an incredible institute. It belongs in every state in the union, and Western New York is blessed to have it because the only one that exists right now is in Rochester, New York. And so the other reason that we're doing it here through Tom's generosity is he wants those students to not only have a curriculum, but a practicum. And so as we're coaching founders, they're sometimes going to be in that building and the students get to see actual founders struggle through it. And then we spend time with them in the classroom translating it. And we can come up with the first and only go-to-market certificate. So Western New Yorkers, founders have more people to hire who are the market developers and not the salespeople. Yep. And of course, the third reason is because, as anybody knows in Western New York, Tom is extraordinarily generous in helping this economy grow and to be a part of it. And that's the third reason he's doing it. It launches March 31st, and we're actively recruiting right now. It's one of the reasons I'm in this building. And I'm privileged to be among the founders at 43 North. We're looking for business-to-business founders in Western New York who have a product and are looking for product market fit and have a growth mindset, and more important than anything else are learn-it-alls, because you can't help a know-it-all and you kind of don't want to. And so if you're interested and need the help, what I've got going on can be found at GrowthX.com. Under the founders menu, you'll see Galsano Institute. We're actively looking for only 15 companies, and we've already started filling those spots. So if you're out there and listening, and this is of use to you, please be in touch. We'd love the opportunity to help. I am grateful for the opportunity to be here today. I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk to your audience. You know, my reason is to earn the right to help founders, because that's where, investments and long-term relationships come from.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the pod today, Andrew.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Awesome. That's been Latitude, guys. We'll see you in the next one.
Cheers.